This is a documentary about creativity. In this film I will explore the nature of creativity, the psychology behind it, the reasons why people are creative, and also relate all that to my own experience. It is important to note that everyone is of course creative in their own way. Doctors, carpenters, scientists and ice cream vendors all have their own ways of being creative in their work, and if it is not in their work then it is in some other aspect of their lives. But in this documentary I'll be focusing mainly on the stereotypical creative roles, such as the writer, artist, actor and musician. My name is Yassin Rozeman, I'm 22 years old and I feel as though I'm not as creative as I used to be. I think when we're very young, we have a natural curiosity about things and a tendency to be creative and original. It is when we grow up, however, usually in our teens, that some of us lose the drive to be creative. At least that was the case for me. In this way, when I was a child, between the ages of maybe 4 to 14, I would write short stories, I'd draw, dance, I'd paint and act a lot. I also picked up guitar and drums, but since the age of 16 I've stopped improving on these things. I'm hoping in this documentary to uncover the secrets of how to retain and remain consistent in one's creativity, and hopefully become creative again myself at the same time.
I want to communicate as strongly as I can to the people I'm performing for, and occasionally I get there, but it's usually after a long period of playing. But when I get there, I feel totally okay about everything, and it's effortless, and it's a spiritual experience, So it sort of works on every level. Really, it's sensual. It's using your mind, but you're getting to a place in your mind, body, and spirit that is a special place.
You feel really alive and really in touch with everything. You sense the beauty of the music and you so want to put it over, and you feel really in touch with your own feelings, and it's just a wonderful thing.
One famous jazz musician called Eric Dolphy said, music is in the air and it's there and then it's gone. So it's different from other art forms, from painting and literature and so on. But I suppose, like dance, it's something that's happening. You're making it and it's happening. You've got to want to do it so badly that you can't stop yourself. And I think that is the separating factor. Charlie Parker played 12 or 15 hours a day for 2 years at a certain age and drove his neighbours nuts. But he had to do it. There was something inside of him that made him do this. And he'd been inspired by listening to jazz musicians in Kansas City. And he wanted to do what they did. And that's what drove him on. So you've got to have that thing driving you on to do all the work.
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily spiritual, although particularly with my artwork, people tend to see a spiritual side to it once I have completed it. So although I don't necessarily label it as spiritual, I think it just becomes that once I've done a piece. I mean, because I've been travelling in India and the Middle East, and that's where I take my main inspiration from. So for example, I look at the architecture, I look at the textiles, and sort of patterns and symbols within those are then all incorporated into my pieces. And often when I'm going around and about, I would also say that it does make me see the world differently, because it makes me more observant, because I'm looking out for these things. So, I take a lot more pictures and things like that, and then it's only when I come home that I sort of compile the photographs and see what I've got to work with to make the next new piece. You see, when I was younger, I've never had a television and things like that, so often I've got lost into books and reading, and therefore, I think my imagination really does play a big part in it as well.
So the difference between myself and an art therapist, I suppose it would be quite useful to point out that in art therapy, it's much more about the process of creating a piece of art. In my work, we also use that process, but then we may... the piece of art becomes a metaphor for a difficulty the client might be experiencing. You can talk through the art, you can assign the art properties that the person themselves might be having difficulties expressing themselves. So it becomes quite a strong metaphor, and it keeps the client safe until they're ready to perhaps own what might be going on more personally. Even in drugs like Ritalin, that is commonly used for ADHD, there have been patients who have described themselves as not being fully engaged with the world, as creative as they used to be when they weren't on it. So I think we have to be quite careful. But the creative mind is something that society, it can become a problem.
What makes good writing, in your opinion?
Very difficult to answer. I think it's something to do with using language without cliche, using language precisely and ideally with originality, but especially without cliche, so that you're treating your reader, I suppose, with respect. You're not talking down to your reader. It's quite a hard thing to say what it is. But there are many bestsellers whom people love and have some recipe for success, but they don't necessarily use writing in a good way. It's a hard thing to give a neat answer to. I think it all depends. There are many writers in the past, famously, like Proust, or writers you might not have heard of, Nadine Gordimer, a South African writer. They were ill in their childhood. They dropped out of school education. Many, and they spent a lot of time, say, convalescing and reading a lot, and that relates to the point about whether you need to read a lot, for instance, to write. But just focusing on your question, for instance, young children. I remember the poem of one of my sons at the age of 4 or 5, thinking this is a stunning thing. What is it about the success of that it's devoid of life's experience, devoid of being able to spell correctly or whatever, that makes it just wonderful. It's a sort of insight into life, originality. It's something authentic, unpretentious. There's all sorts of things. So obviously, it all depends what kind of writing.
Yeah.
Many writers spend a lot of time in their own bedroom, in their own room, in their own office.
Yeah.
Some people are very imaginative. Some people, like Charles Dickens, for instance, had a photographic memory, apparently, so that his stories are full of minute detail, great rambling stories where every detail matters. And it's more there, you would say, to do with his great memory, and his observation skills, rather than perhaps the range of experience.
I see. What are the most common personality traits you've come across in your time working with actors so far? Is it playfulness, or is it a certain drive? Is it a loudness or a quietness? And generally, what is the personality of your average actor?
Well, I'm not sure there is one. I think that you can get very, very extrovert actors, which is what the general public tend to imagine actors are like, but you can get very, very introverted actors. A case in point would be Ben Whishaw, who I remember being a very, very quiet young man in his training. Lisa Dillon too, incredibly quiet, and yet those two are now very big stars. I'm not sure if they're any more louder or more extrovert now, because I haven't spoken to them for a while, but certainly as young trainees they were quite introverted. I think an actor's got to always retain a playfulness. That's the thing in common with actors, which is what you mentioned in the question. That has to be there. I think that human beings innately are creative, and that creativity can show itself in many respects and doesn't necessarily have to have an artistic outlet. Many business people are highly creative. I think there are lives and lifestyles which will make creativity quite difficult, or stultify, if you like, because one has to be a bus driver or work in an office where the work doesn't allow you to have your own ideas or put your own stamp on it. But that's not to say that those people are not, that are forced into those situations, don't have creativity in other areas of their life.
This is my childhood friend and aspiring jazz musician Daniel Mulligan. He plays the trombone first and foremost, but also bass, drums, piano and violin. He recently started learning trombone at the university level at Trinity College London. Being a jazz trombonist isn't a walk in the park. Do you feel you have what it takes to go all the way?
Yes. I think I have what it takes to go all the way.
How do you feel when you're playing music at your best?
It feels effortless. It feels like when I'm playing at my best I can't put a foot wrong, so to speak.
Do you think that in terms of interest you chose music or music chose you? In other words, could you control how you felt about wanting to play, or was it always in your blood?
Well, I think music chose me because of my situation. My parents are both musicians, my sister's a musician, and it's monkey see, monkey do. You know, just